Stop wasting money on shriveled, tasteless fruit from the grocery store, because a fully loaded orchard could be sitting on your patio right now. If you think you need a sprawling backyard to grow real fruit, think again. All you need is a single pot and the right dwarf variety to turn a tiny corner of concrete into a thriving harvest machine. Today, I am revealing 15 more high-yield dwarf fruit trees built specifically for container gardening. 15 plants, 15 explosive harvests, 15 flavors you simply cannot buy fresh at a supermarket. Kicking things off at number 15 is the legendary Meyer Lemon. Unlike a standard grocery store lemon tree that sulks and refuses to fruit indoors, the Meyer Lemon is a genetic cross between a true lemon and a Mandarin orange, making it naturally compact, naturally sweet, and naturally obsessed with producing fruit in a pot. Because citrus roots hate sitting in soggy soil, you need a sturdy 10 to 15-gallon container with excellent drainage holes. Fill it with a fast-draining citrus and cactus soil mix heavily amended with coarse sand and perlite. Always buy a grafted nursery tree, since a lemon grown from seed can take up to a decade to fruit and rarely produces true to type. Place the pot in the sunniest spot you own, ideally 6 to 8 hours of direct light. Water deeply, then let the top 2 inches of soil dry out completely before watering again, since constantly wet roots invite deadly citrus rot. Feed it every 4 to 6 weeks during the growing season, with a citrus-specific fertilizer, rich in nitrogen and micronutrients like iron and zinc. The reward is almost unheard of in the fruit tree world. A healthy Meyer lemon can flower and fruit nearly year-round, meaning you could be harvesting ripe lemons in the middle of winter while snow sits outside. Harvest when the skin turns a deep egg yolk yellow and gives slightly under gentle pressure. Use the intensely fragrant, less acidic juice for cocktails, salad dressings, or a bright homemade lemon curd. According to horticultural research published by the University of California Cooperative Extension, Meyer lemons carry noticeably lower acidity and higher sugar content than commercial Eureka or Lisbon lemons, which is exactly why chefs consider them a premium specialty ingredient rather than an ordinary grocery store staple. Here is a fascinating fact. The Meyer lemon almost vanished from the United States entirely in the 1940s because scientists discovered the widely planted trees were silently carrying a deadly citrus virus. Nearly the entire commercial supply had to be destroyed and replaced with a clean, virus-free strain before the fruit could ever return to backyard gardens. Middle in the plan, if the Meyer lemon is the elegant showpiece of your patio, the key lime is the scrappy, relentless workhorse. This compact citrus tree is famous for producing hundreds of small, intensely tart floral limes packed onto a single tiny frame. Because key lime trees carry sharp thorns and a dense thicket of branches, a heavy 10-gallon terracotta pot gives it the stability it needs without taking over your entire patio. Use a well-draining citrus soil mix and always start from a grafted sapling, since seed-grown limes are wildly unpredictable and often thornier than the parent plant. Place it in blazing full sun and water only when the top layer of soil feels dry, since key limes despise waterlogged roots even more than lemons do. Fertilize monthly during spring and summer with a balanced citrus feed, and expect 2 major flushes of fragrant white blossoms each year that eventually swell into small green limes. Harvest when the limes turn from dark green to a pale yellow-green and feel slightly soft. Squeeze the intensely aromatic juice into a classic key lime pie or use it to brighten seafood ceviche. A comprehensive nutritional review published by the USDA confirms that key limes contain significantly higher concentrations of aromatic oils in their peel compared to standard Persian limes, which explains their unmistakably sharper, more perfumed flavor in baking. Here is a fascinating fact. The key lime is technically not native to Florida at all, despite the state building an entire dessert culture around it. Historical botanical records trace its origins back to Southeast Asia, where it likely traveled along ancient trade routes before Spanish explorers eventually introduced it to the Caribbean and Florida Keys. Coming in at number 13 is the astonishing dwarf columnar apple. Most people assume a full-sized apple tree, with its sprawling canopy and towering branches, could never survive in a container. Columnar apple varieties completely shatter that assumption by growing as a single narrow trunk studded directly with fruiting spurs, essentially producing a living fruit column. Because these trees grow upward instead of outward, A 15-gallon heavy plastic pot provides more than enough root space while keeping the entire plant narrow enough to fit against a wall or railing. Fill it with a rich, well-draining loamy potting mix heavily amended with compost. Purchase a grafted Columnar variety, since regular apple seeds produce completely unpredictable full-size trees. Place the container in full sun and water deeply whenever the top few inches of soil dry out, increasing frequency significantly during the summer fruiting season. Feed it in early spring with a balanced granular fruit tree fertilizer. Because most apple varieties require a second tree nearby for cross-pollination, many gardeners keep two different columnar varieties side by side to guarantee a heavy fruit set. The harvest arrives in late summer through early autumn, when the apples reach their full color and detach from the branch with a gentle upward twist. According to research published by Cornell University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, columnar apple varieties were originally discovered as a single spontaneous genetic mutation on a Macintosh tree in Canada, a mutation that completely eliminated the tree's ability to grow lateral branches. Here is a fascinating fact. A single mature columnar apple tree, despite measuring barely 2 feet wide, can still produce up to 50 pounds of full-sized apples in a single season, making it pound for pound one of the most space-efficient fruit trees on this entire list. At number 12 we have the sensational dwarf Bonanza peach. Forget everything you assumed about needing a massive orchard for a proper peach harvest. This genetic dwarf variety naturally stays under 6 feet tall, while still producing full-sized, intensely juicy peaches directly on its stubby, densely packed branches. Select a heavy 15-gallon plastic or wooden container to anchor the top-heavy, fruit-laden canopy against strong wind gusts. Fill it with a well-draining potting mix amended generously with compost and coarse sand. Always purchase a bare root dormant tree in early spring, rather than attempting to grow from a grocery store pit, which almost never produces quality fruit. Place the pot in the most intensely sunny spot available. Peaches are heavy drinkers during fruit development, so water deeply and consistently, never allowing the soil to fully dry out once the fruit begins to swell. Feed it in early spring with a slow-release granular fertilizer formulated for fruit trees. Harvest arrives in the peak heat of summer, when the skin transitions from green to a deep blushing red and yellow, and the flesh yields gently under thumb pressure. Slice the intensely sweet, fragrant fruit fresh over yogurt, or bake it into a rustic peach cobbler. Agricultural research from the University of California, Davis, confirms that genetic dwarf peach varieties like Bonanza carry the exact same fruit sugar content as their full-sized counterparts, meaning the smaller tree sacrifices nothing in flavor. Here is a fascinating fact. Peaches belong to the same botanical genus as almonds, and the hard, wrinkled pit at the center of every peach is structurally almost identical to an almond shell, a strange evolutionary relationship documented extensively by botanists studying the Prunus family. Sliding into number 11 is the show-stopping Dwarf Apricot, specifically compact varieties like Garden Annie. This tree rewards patience with an explosive spring bloom of delicate pink blossoms, followed by a summer harvest of intensely sweet, honey-colored fruit. Because apricot trees develop a moderately deep root system, use a substantial 15-gallon plastic pot filled with a rich, well-draining loam heavily amended with compost. Purchase a grafted dwarf nursery tree to guarantee true-to-type fruit and a genuinely compact mature size. Place the container in full sun, ideally in a location sheltered from harsh late frost, since apricots bloom notoriously early and a surprise cold snap can wipe out the entire season's flowers. Water deeply and regularly through spring, then ease back slightly once the fruit begins to ripen to concentrate the sugars. Feed it once in early spring with a balanced organic fruit tree fertilizer. Harvest in early to mid-summer, when the fruit turns a deep golden orange and separates easily from the branch with a gentle twist. Eat them fresh off the tree, dry them into intensely chewy snacks, or bake them into a classic apricot tart. A detailed fruit quality study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry confirms that tree-ripened apricots contain dramatically higher levels of beta-carotene than the hard, underripe apricots typically sold in grocery stores, which are picked weeks before peak nutritional maturity. Here is a fascinating fact. Apricot kernels, the almond-shaped seed hidden inside the pit, naturally contain a compound called amygdalin that converts into cyanide when metabolized, which is exactly why culinary use of the kernel is strictly limited to tiny, carefully processed amounts in traditional Italian amaretto liqueur. Number 10 brings us the remarkable dwarf plum, specifically compact varieties like Santa Rosa grown on dwarfing rootstock. This tree produces a spectacular explosion of white spring blossoms, followed by clusters of glossy, deeply colored plums, perfect for a small patio. Select a heavy 15-gallon container to support the tree's naturally vigorous, somewhat top-heavy growth habit. Fill it with a well-draining, slightly acidic potting mix enriched with compost. Purchase a grafted dwarf tree and check whether your specific variety is self-fruitful or requires a second pollinator tree nearby, since many plum varieties will not set fruit alone. Place the pot in full sun and water deeply and consistently through the growing season, since inconsistent watering causes the developing fruit to crack open right on the branch. Feed it in early spring with a balanced granular fertilizer formulated for stone fruit trees. The harvest arrives in mid to late summer, when the skin develops a deep uniform color and a light dusty bloom, and the fruit gives slightly under gentle pressure. Eat them fresh, halve and grill them for a smoky dessert, or simmer them down into a rich tangy plum jam. According to a nutritional analysis published by the USDA, plums and their dried counterpart, prunes, contain unusually high concentrations of natural sorbitol and dietary fiber, a combination scientifically proven to significantly support healthy digestion. Here is a fascinating fact. The plum is considered one of the very first fruits ever domesticated by humans, with archaeological evidence uncovered in the Caucasus region suggesting cultivation dates back over 6,000 years, making it older than both written language and the invention of the wheel. At number 9 is the remarkable Dwarf Avocado, specifically the compact Wurtz variety, often sold under the name Little Caddo. Most people assume avocados demand a massive, sprawling tropical estate, but this genetically compact variety tops out around 10 feet and fruits reliably in a large container. Because avocado roots are notoriously sensitive and prone to rot, select a wide, extremely well-draining 20-gallon container, ideally with multiple drainage holes. Fill it with a loose, well-aerated potting mix designed for citrus or palms, heavily amended with coarse bark and perlite. Growing from a grocery store pit almost never produces quality fruit, so purchase a grafted nursery tree instead. Place the container in full sun with some protection from harsh, drying winds. Water deeply, then allow the top several inches of soil to dry out before watering again, since avocado roots suffocate quickly in constantly wet soil. Feed it every 6 to 8 weeks during the growing season with a specialized avocado fertilizer rich in nitrogen and micronutrients. Patience is essential here, since a young tree can take 3 to 4 years before its first meaningful harvest. Once established, avocados are ready to harvest when they reach full size, but remain hard, since unlike most fruit, they only ripen after being removed from the tree. According to a detailed nutritional profile published by the USDA, avocados contain significantly higher levels of healthy monounsaturated fats than nearly any other commonly grown fruit, which is precisely why nutritionists classify them as a fruit that behaves nutritionally like a fat source. Here is a fascinating fact. Botanically speaking, the avocado is classified as a single-seeded berry, and scientists studying its evolutionary history believe it was originally built to be swallowed whole by massive prehistoric mammals like giant ground sloths, animals that have been extinct for roughly 10,000 years. Number 8 goes to the dazzling dwarf Satsuma Mandarin. This is one of the most forgiving, cold-hardy citrus trees you can grow, producing an abundance of easy peel, nearly seedless orange fruit with a flavor far superior to anything found in a grocery store net bag. Use a sturdy 10 to 15-gallon container filled with a fast-draining citrus soil mix. Purchase a grafted dwarf tree from a certified nursery to guarantee reliable fruiting within just a few years. Place it in full sun, ideally in the warmest, most sheltered corner of your patio. Water deeply, then allow the top few inches of soil to dry slightly before watering again. Feed it every 4 to 6 weeks during the growing season with a citrus-specific fertilizer. Satsumas are famously self-fruitful, meaning a single tree will happily produce a full harvest without needing a second pollinator nearby. The fruit ripens in late autumn through early winter, turning a deep orange and developing a slightly loose, easy-to-peel skin. Eat the intensely sweet segments fresh, or juice them for a naturally low-acid morning drink. A horticultural report published by the University of Florida IFAS Extension notes that Satsuma mandarins tolerate colder temperatures than nearly any other commercially grown citrus variety, allowing gardeners in cooler climates to grow genuinely sweet oranges that would otherwise be impossible outdoors. Magapandikulariyad, minod, tag. Here is a fascinating fact. The Satsuma Mandarin was named after the former Satsuma province of Japan, even though the variety likely originated in China centuries earlier, and it became so central to Japanese culture that it is traditionally eaten as a New Year's good luck fruit. Climbing to number 7 is the dwarf grapefruit, specifically compact varieties grafted onto dwarfing citrus rootstock. This tree produces an impressive yield of enormous, tangy fruit, despite staying remarkably compact and manageable in a large pot. Select a heavy 15 to 20-gallon container to support the surprisingly large fruit load relative to the tree's overall size. Fill it with a fast-draining citrus soil mix heavily amended with coarse sand. Purchase a grafted dwarf tree, since seed-grown grapefruit takes years longer to fruit and rarely matches the parent's flavor. Place the container in the sunniest possible location, since grapefruit trees require intense, prolonged heat to properly sweeten their notoriously tart fruit. Water deeply and consistently, allowing the topsoil to dry slightly between waterings. Feed it every 4 to 6 weeks with a citrus-specific fertilizer during the growing season. The harvest window is unusually long, with fruit often staying perfectly fresh on the branch for weeks after ripening. Harvest when the fruit reaches full size and a rich yellow or blushing pink color, and use a twist and pull motion to detach it cleanly. Slice it fresh for breakfast or broil it with a dusting of brown sugar for a warm dessert. According to a clinical nutrition review published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, grapefruit consumption has been shown to interact with several common prescription medications, meaning patients on certain cholesterol or blood pressure drugs are specifically advised to consult a physician before regularly eating it. Here is a fascinating fact. The grapefruit is not an ancient fruit at all. Botanists confirm it first appeared in Barbados in the 1700s as an accidental natural hybrid between a sweet orange and a much larger citrus fruit called a pomelo, making it one of the youngest citrus varieties on the entire planet. Number 6 is the striking dwarf persimmon, specifically compact varieties like the fuyu grown on dwarfing rootstock. This ornamental yet highly productive tree produces brilliant orange, tomato-shaped fruit that hangs dramatically on bare branches after the leaves drop in autumn. Use a 15-gallon heavy plastic or wooden container filled with a rich, well-draining loamy potting mix. Purchase a grafted dwarf tree from a certified nursery, and note that fuyu persimmons are self-fruitful, meaning a single tree will produce a full harvest without a second pollinator. Place the container in full sun and water deeply and consistently through the growing season, tapering off slightly as the fruit matures in autumn. Feed it once in early spring with a balanced granular fertilizer. The harvest arrives in mid to late autumn, often continuing well after the tree drops its leaves, creating a striking display of bright orange fruit against bare branches. Harvest fuyu persimmons while still firm, since unlike astringent varieties, they are meant to be eaten crisp, sliced thin like an apple into salads. A detailed nutritional analysis published by the USDA confirms that persimmons contain remarkably high concentrations of dietary fiber and vitamin A compared to most other tree fruits. Here is a fascinating fact. Astringent persimmon varieties, unlike the fuyu, contain extremely high levels of tannins that make an underripe fruit almost impossible to eat, producing an intensely bitter, mouth-puckering sensation that only fully disappears once the fruit becomes nearly overripe and jelly-soft. At number 5 is the elegant dwarf columnar pear. Just like its columnar apple cousin, this genetically compact pear grows as a single narrow upright trunk covered in fruiting spurs, making it one of the most space-efficient fruit trees you can put on a balcony. Select a 15-gallon heavy plastic container and fill it with a rich, well-draining loamy potting mix heavily amended with compost. Purchase a grafted columnar variety, and plan for a second compatible pear tree nearby, since most pear varieties require cross-pollination to set a meaningful crop. Place the container in full sun and water deeply whenever the top few inches of soil dry out. Feed it in early spring with a balanced granular fruit tree fertilizer. Pears are famously patient trees, often taking a few years to settle in before producing their first substantial harvest. Unlike most fruit, pears should never be left to ripen on the tree. Harvest them while still firm and slightly underripe in late summer to early autumn, then let them finish ripening on the counter for several days until the flesh yields gently near the stem. Bake them into a warm tart or slice them fresh alongside sharp cheese. According to post-harvest research published by Washington State University's Tree Fruit Research Center, pears are one of the only common fruits that develop their signature buttery texture exclusively through this off-tree ripening process, since ripening on the branch causes the flesh to turn grainy and mealy. Here is a fascinating fact. The distinctive gritty texture found near the core of many pear varieties comes from clusters of hardened plant cells called stone cells or sclerids, the exact same tough cellular structure that forms the shell of a coconut. The runner-up at number 2 is the dwarf olive tree, specifically compact varieties like Little Ollie grown for genuine fruit production rather than purely ornamental use. This strikingly beautiful silver-leafed tree thrives on neglect and rewards patient gardeners with an abundant autumn harvest. Use a heavy 15 to 20-gallon terracotta pot, since the weight helps anchor the tree and terracotta allows excess moisture to escape efficiently. Fill it with an extremely well-draining, slightly sandy potting mix, since olives absolutely despise sitting in wet soil. Purchase a grafted fruit-producing variety rather than a purely ornamental cultivar bred only for foliage. Place the container in the most punishing sun-scorched spot on your patio, since olive trees genuinely thrive in intense heat and drought-like conditions. Water only when the soil is almost completely dry, and feed it sparingly, just once or twice a season, with a balanced organic fertilizer, since overfeeding olives produces excessive leafy growth at the expense of fruit. The harvest arrives in autumn, when the small green fruits gradually darken toward black. Raw olives straight off the tree are intensely bitter and completely inedible, requiring a curing process in a salt water or lye brine for several weeks before they become the rich, savory olives you recognize. According to food science research published by the University of California, Davis Olive Center, this bitterness comes from a naturally occurring compound called illurapine, which must be broken down through curing before the fruit becomes palatable. Here is a fascinating fact. Olive trees are famously long-lived, with several documented specimens across the Mediterranean confirmed by dendrochronologists to be well over 2,000 years old, meaning some living olive trees today were already ancient when the Roman Empire was at its peak. Taking the absolute crown at number 1 is the extraordinary dwarf kiwi, specifically the cold-hardy Arctic kiwi vine. Standard kiwi vines demand a massive trellis system and years of patience, but this compact, fuzz-free variety produces grape-sized, smooth-skinned kiwis that can be eaten whole, skin and all, directly off a small patio trellis. Because this is a vigorous climbing vine rather than a traditional tree, use a wide 10 to 15-gallon container paired with a sturdy trellis or arbor built directly into the pot to support its rapid climbing growth. Fill it with a rich, slightly acidic, well-draining potting soil heavily amended with compost. You will need both a male and female vine planted nearby to guarantee pollination and fruit set, since a single vine alone will never produce fruit. Place the container in full sun to partial shade and water consistently, never allowing the soil to fully dry out during the growing season. Feed it every 4 to 6 weeks during spring and summer, with a balanced organic fertilizer to fuel its explosive vine growth. The harvest arrives in early to mid-autumn, when the small grape-sized fruits turn a deep reddish purple and soften slightly to the touch. Because the skin is completely smooth and fuzz-free, you can pop the entire tiny kiwi straight into your mouth, releasing an intensely sweet, tropical burst of flavor with zero peeling required. According to a nutritional comparison published by the USDA, hardy kiwi varieties contain significantly higher vitamin C concentrations gram for gram than standard fuzzy kiwi fruit, making this tiny grape-sized fruit one of the most nutrient-dense options on this entire list. Here is a fascinating fact. Despite its intensely tropical flavor, the Arctic kiwi vine is scientifically documented to survive winter temperatures plunging as low as -25 degrees Fahrenheit, making it one of the only genuinely tropical-tasting fruits capable of surviving a brutal northern winter completely unprotected. That wraps up our list of 15 more high-yield dwarf fruit trees perfect for container gardening. Which of these varieties are you most excited to add to your patio orchard? Did I leave out a dwarf fruit tree that has already earned a permanent spot in your own backyard? Let me know in the comments below, along with what gardening topics you would like me to cover next. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upcoming gardening project. Bye for now, and happy planting.